Special thanks to Horizon Therapeutics for sponsoring the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast, working tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics' mission at horizontherapeutics.com.
Starting a dialogue, especially as a father, it's super important. Just having a talk with another dad who's either walked that path himself or not. Sometimes just getting somebody who's out of the circle that can at least just lend an ear. Sometimes the most therapeutic things I've done for me personally has just been to talk and just to get it out.
That's our guest this week, Dan Redfield. Dan is an Emmy-nominated filmmaker and the father of 3 children, Henry, Reagan, and Ava, who very sadly passed away in 2021 from infantile Tay-Sachs, a rare inherited disease. We'll hear how Dan and his wife Kristen have started adventures for Ava, documenting and recording life stories for families of kids with terminal disease. That's all on this Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Here now, the host of the Dad to Dad podcast and the founder of the Special Fathers Network, David Hirsch.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast presented by the Special Fathers Network, a Dad to Dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Thank you to those who supported the 21st Century Dads on a Ride 2023 campaign, which was a 3,000-plus mile bicycle race from Oceanside, California to Annapolis, Maryland. I was one of the 4 racers, and it took us 7 days, 19 hours, and 10 minutes to go from coast to coast. Special thanks to the following donors for contributing $1,000 or more. In alphabetical order, they are Ina Bird, Kim Duchessois, Jim Duran, Chaz Ebert, John Guido, Horizon Therapeutics, Scott Marcotte, Damian Navarro, Dick Reck, Barbara and Glenn Reed, Rotary Club of Chicago, Warren Rustan, Don Stadler, Nick Topicha Dolny, and UBS Financial Services. If you've not already contributed, please do so by visiting 21stcenturydads.org. Your tax-deductible contribution will help keep our programs free to all concerned. I would really appreciate your support.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org. So now let's hear this fascinating conversation between Dan Redfield and David Hirsch.
I'm thrilled to be talking today with Dan Redfield of Anchorage, Alaska, who is an Emmy-nominated motion graphic artist and animator, as well as a father of 3, including a daughter who passed away at 6 after suffering from infantile Tay-Sachs. Dan, thank you for taking the time to do a podcast interview for the Special Fathers Network.
Thank you very much for having me.
You and your wife, Kristen, have been married for 2 years and are the proud parents of 3 children, Henry, 7 months, Reagan, 3, and Ava, who passed away in November 2021 at age 4.5 after suffering from infantile Tay-Sachs, a rare inherited genetic disease. Let's start with some background. Where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
Sure. So I was born in Landstuhl, Germany. Both my parents were Army. Their last station after a few years was up in Alaska, so they got out of the military and then kind of made a home for us, and that's where I attended schooling up until high school. I had one sister, and I was really close with her. Kind of did everything together. I was your older big brother. I was very protective of her, and we had a lot of fun. We kind of independent. We had to kind of make our own fun, but we were really close, and played hockey, played sports, enjoyed the outdoors, and my parents have since split and moved away, but Alaska's always been my home, and so I've stayed here.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. And in a previous conversation, you mentioned that sadly your sister passed away. What was the backstory on that?
So my sister, Amanda, was 21 years old. She was a week shy of her 22nd birthday, and she had basically, she was manic bipolar, manic depressant, just like my mom. And it's about 21 years old is when her particular case started to kind of come up. And she just, she made a few mistakes, life mistakes, and She was just in a really dark place because of her chemical imbalance. And after a while being in a dark place, she just made some bad decisions, and they ended up finding her on the floor of a hotel. And so I don't think it was an intentional, but it was what was labeled as accidental suicide.
Wow. Well, my heart really reaches out to you and your family. It must have been very difficult, even though it was quite a few years ago.
Yeah, it was difficult because it was so sudden and unexpected. And even today, I still talk with my parents and try to connect the dots on exactly where her head was and what was going on from their perspective. So I think the hardest thing is just putting the pieces together and connecting the dots and getting answers.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. Again, my heart reaches out to you and your family.
Yeah, thank you.
So, out of curiosity, what does your dad do for a living?
Currently, my dad is semi-retired, so he's enjoying the weather in Pensacola, Florida.
Couldn't be much different than Alaska.
Yeah.
And how would you describe your relationship with your dad?
My relationship with my dad is good. We don't talk as much as I'd probably like, and sometimes he's not always there for me emotionally as much as I would like. And during some of the hard parts of my life, I think I wish he was there more, but that just wasn't quite the case. He's a good man. He has a lot of good qualities. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's something I can relate to, Dan. I'm not proud of it, but I wasn't close to my dad for most of our adult life. And, when the pendulum swings one way, like the relationship that you're describing, maybe what you're doing, what I've done, is to try to overcompensate, right? Knowing level of energy that gets created around, a relationship that's not what you anticipate, and you want to do something about that. I think of it as breaking the cycle of father absence. And that doesn't mean somebody who's physically absent, but they could be emotionally or spiritually absent as well. And, I appreciate your openness and your authenticity about the situation and, how it's informed you, right? To be a better husband, a better father, a better human being for that matter. So when you think about the relationship with your dad, I think you had mentioned that, he didn't have a traditional upbringing. And I don't want to make too much of it, but what was his backstory?
So my dad was adopted at birth, which for the longest time I never really gave much of a thought to because his parents that adopted him were amazing people. My grandma and grandpa, they were just great people, and they took him in as one of their own, and they gave him a really good life from my perspective. But I think as I'm now a dad, there's certain things that you now look at, and especially having to deal with trauma in my life, you are the person you are today because of your life experiences. And I think maybe some of that distance that my dad has towards me could have stemmed from, him being adopted. I've asked him about it, and he said no, that doesn't really affect me. But I mean, that would affect me, knowing that you were kind of left and you were kind of abandoned. That would bother me. That would make me feel less valued. I think that would definitely play a part on me. And like you said, the pendulum swings, and I definitely do overcompensate. And like in your TED Talk, you said the 4 things that make a great dad. It's commitment, honesty, just being present, and love and patience. And I think those are the things that I try to give my kids every day and let them know that they're loved and just trying to be there for them in all different ways.
So when you think about the relationship with your dad, was there an important lesson or two beyond what you've mentioned that comes to mind?
Yeah, there's a few lessons. I think one of the best lessons he gave me was we were out in a remote area in Alaska for the 4th of July, and we were going to light off some fireworks. And we had a bag of fireworks, we were on our way to the beach to light them off, and a group of kids came up to us and they asked if they could buy some fireworks from us so that they could have their own little, 4th of July fireworks thing. And my dad gave them a handful of fireworks and didn't accept any money for it. And the kids walked away. And at the time I was young, and I was like, well, why did you do that for? Now we have less fireworks to shoot off. And I don't remember what he said, but obviously the lesson kind of stuck with me is, to share and to kind of be selfless in that manner and kind of spread the joy, I guess. Yeah, there's lessons to be learned. He just kind of shares his some things differently. But that was a great lesson that I learned from him.
So we talked a little bit about school and then career. And I'm wondering, where did your career start, and how has it informed what you're doing now?
So I started my career, basically, I made a video for one of my friends who had passed, something that we could show at his memorial. And at the end of making it and then producing it and having it out there, just the feedback that I got from other people, it was just nice for them to be able to hear, see, just feel the visuals, the audio in the movie, and remember the good times with our friend. And I thought it was interesting to be able to create something from nothing and have something to not only share and show, but to affect, was pretty powerful. And ever since then, I took whatever jobs I could. I was at a point in my life where I didn't have kids, I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have responsibilities really. So I said, if I'm going to ever take this leap and quit my full-time job and pursue a passion that I feel this is it, right now would be the time. And so I was about 21 when I made that leap, and very grateful that I did, because there was a lot of years of working and sacrificing and long hours, but that helped to lay the foundation for my career today. And it's still, happily to say, it's in filmmaking and storytelling, and so I still get to do what I set out to do, and I still love it. I love to adventure, and the filmmaking and the photography allow me to capture those moments and helps for me to share it with other people. My name's Dan Redfield, and these are my photo ventures.
So you have two current focuses, one from a professional standpoint, and the name of the company is Wake One, and you identify yourself as the creative director. So where did the name Wake One come from, and what does Wake One do?
One of my favorite stories. So Wake One comes from my alarm clock that I had when I was 21 and grinding and learning how to become a filmmaker and a motion graphics artist. And, I didn't have any responsibilities. I was renting a 1-bedroom room from my friend's house. And in the room I had a bed, a computer, and an alarm clock. And the alarm clock had 2 settings on it. And the first one was labeled Wake One. And that was set for 5 a.m. when I was ambitious and ready to take the bull by the horns and get up and learn, hone my craft, and kind of get myself one step closer to my goal of being a filmmaker. And, I don't have that alarm clock anymore, but just the idea of, get up, get moving. You can continue to sleep with your dreams or wake up and chase them. That's kind of what that represents to me.
Well, thanks for sharing. You said that one of the buttons said Wake One. What do the other buttons say?
Oh, it was Wake Two. And if you slept through one, you were pretty disappointed with yourself having to answer Wake Two. So you don't want to be Wake Two.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing. And then we'll get into this a little bit later, but the other thing that you put a lot of time and energy, which I know is a passion for you, is this organization, Adventures for Ava. And what does that organization do?
Adventure for Ava is a nonprofit program, so we serve families with special needs. We take them out on a suitable and safe adventure, and then we document their experience and their story in a 10-minute film. We deliver the photos, and then we share their story and film with the world, in addition to a local premiere in front of our audience in Alaska.
Well, thanks for sharing. We'll get into more of that in detail. So I'm sort of curious now, how did you and Kristen meet?
So Kristen and I met through mutual friends. I had split up with my previous relationship I had spent 8 or 9 months just kind of by myself and learning to be by myself. I'd spent a lot of time in the past in long-term relationships and hadn't really been single for very long. So I kind of took a time out and just wanted to be single for 8 or 9 months. When I left that relationship, I wrote down the things that that person was bringing to the relationship and what I needed, and that wasn't being fulfilled. And that kind of gave me the understanding that maybe this relationship isn't working out. These are some of the things that I need and I'm not getting. That was really great because now I could take that information and enter the dating pool again and know actually what I need in a partner. And Kristen runs a coffee shop and I love coffee. And so I just happened to swing by, and at the time I was drinking caramel macchiatos, which if you're a coffee drinker, it's not even coffee. It's just a sugary dessert. But as our relationship matured, I matured, and happy to say that I'm a straight black coffee drinker now. She turned me on to the intricacies of good coffee.
I'm sure there was more to it than just the coffee, though.
No, absolutely. I mean, you could just tell. Anyone can tell when you meet her. I mean, she just has a glow that comes from the inside, and she's a very selfless person, and she genuinely cares for me, and she genuinely cares for the people that are in her inner circle, and she's just a very kind person.
And do you have some shared mutual interest as well?
Yeah, I mean, we both love being outside. We both love hiking. We both love our family. Yeah, hiking and being in the outdoors is what kind of really solidified the relationship. Our first date was going out on a hike. Clearly, she saw something in me that I was harmless and that I was trustworthy. So,
and when I think about hiking, your definition of hiking and my definition of hiking are probably a little bit different based on the geography.
Yeah, I think hiking, along with like you were saying with your long distance bike riding, there's something to be learned in a mental aspect about that. You know, some of the things that I take away from hiking is just you got to take one step at a time. You take one day at a time, you take one step at a time. And if you take enough one steps at a time, you're going to get somewhere eventually. And it gets you to realize like you're capable of a lot more than you think. For a lot of people, you know, whatever you think your max is, it's probably only 50%. And hiking, I feel like, unlocks that perspective for me. You know, you look up and you're like, there's no way. And then you just keep taking one step at a time, and pretty soon you're at the top looking down, and there's that feeling of achievement that you've grinded, and now you're at the top, and the top's always so pretty, and it always makes it worth it. So there's a lot of life lessons to be learned from hiking.
Let's talk about special needs, first on a personal level and then beyond. And what was Ava's diagnosis and how did it come about?
Ava's diagnosis was infantile Tay-Sachs, and it came about right around her first birthday. She wasn't hitting milestones, and her being our first kid, we weren't quite in tune with exactly where those milestones should be. We just got to her 1 year checkup, and she couldn't pull herself up from a laying position. And so we knew something was wrong. We put her into physical therapy. We started doing testing. And it wasn't until we got an eye exam, we went and saw an optometrist because she wasn't tracking us walking around the room, and her pupils weren't dilating when they should have been. So there's got to be something going on with her eyes. So we brought her into an optometrist, and real quickly, the optometrist said, I've discovered something that's a telltale sign. We're going to need to do blood work and genetic testing to confirm, but this is what I think it is. And the blood test confirmed it, that it was infantile Tay-Sachs. And before that diagnosis, I remember being like devastated because we had been given the blanket diagnosis of cerebral palsy. And I just had a hard time thinking about what her life is going to be like, all the challenges she's going to have to face. And then we were hit with Tay-Sachs, which is fatal. And just like, it was like we went from low to, the abyss.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the initial expectation, as severe as cerebral palsy might be, paled in comparison to learning what the actual diagnosis is with infantile Tay-Sachs. So I imagine you had to climb the steep part of the learning curve and come up to speed on what that is, how does it come about, and what do you do from here, especially if it's considered to be fatal.
So there's 3 different types of Tay-Sachs. There's infantile, juvenile, and late onset. Speaking directly to the infantile Tay-Sachs, life expectancy is usually 3 to 5.
So the worst type, based on what you just said, is the diagnosis of infantile Tay-Sachs, because maybe like ALS, infantile ALS, the life expectancy is very short.
Yeah, so by the time we got that diagnosis, we had to bring ourselves up to speed with how do we care for her, how do we improve whatever we can, and then how do we keep her comfortable and give her the best life that we can in such a short period of time.
Was there any meaningful advice you got early on that helped put that all in perspective?
Yeah, so we have a support group, the National Tay-Sachs and Allied Diseases. There's members within that community that gave us a lot of advice on both the medical caretaking side of things. And then in terms of like the mental side of things, I think just seeing people on the other side, people that had lost a kid and were still together as parents, as a family, and that were still, functioning people. They hadn't fallen into depression or they were still there. And that was huge to see, at least for me.
Yeah, well, thank God for organizations like that, and then being able to connect with other parents. It reminds me of the work that we do with the Special Fathers Network, right, which is trying to connect dads with other dads who have been there and done that. And you don't know what you don't know. And one of the challenges that men have, probably less so than women, is that we're the gender that doesn't pull over and ask for directions when we're lost. Right? And we're talking about something pretty modest, like how do you get from point A to point B in your vehicle? If you take that same problem-solving approach and you apply it to being a parent of a child with special needs, you're going to try to figure it out on your own. You're setting yourself up for disappointment, right? And you're not going to be able to help your child reach their full potential, right, if you're going to try to figure it out yourself. So the fact that these organizations exist, and there are parents out there, dads in our case, willing to make themselves available to lend some insights on what the journey is all about, not from a medical standpoint or maybe a legal standpoint. That's what doctors and lawyers are for, but just from one person to another, right? And thank you for sharing. And it's one of those clubs that you don't want to be a member of, right? But if you do find yourself in that situation, maybe there's some lessons to be learned, right, about helping the next person up the ladder, if you will.
Yeah, I think if I could go back and if there was any regret that I did have, it was feeling that I had to bear that responsibility of being the anchor of the family. When my wife did go to work in the mornings, I remember that was like my time to purge, and I would just cry. And I think I cried after Ava's diagnosis for like the first 3 months, I think every day. And I think my regret would be not reaching out to maybe one of the dads in the group directly. I mean, I found my way, and I think I found my way mostly through my wife, who was asking those questions. So she was the one asking for directions, and I would just kind of pull that feedback from her.
You were drafting, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
When you look back, were there some other important decisions you made as parents raising a child with these life-threatening challenges?
One key decision that was really important for us was her G-tube. There are some families that just allow their kids they know the path that they're going on, and they just don't want to do any intervention, which is fine. But our decision was we wanted to keep Ava happy and healthy for as long as she was happy and healthy, and there were certain lines that we had drawn, but if we can get food in her and keep her healthy and happy, by doing that we gained another 2.5 years of her life, and they were meaningful years. So that was a big decision that we made. And I'm happy that we did.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. That is a difficult decision, at least as I've had it described by others. It's not a right or a wrong, right? It's a personal choice, right? And you have to respect parents who go down one path versus the other. And, until you're there, you don't know. When you get to that fork in the road and you have to make some of these important decisions, in some cases, as it relates to the medical care that's available. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, one of the doctors had said something that really stuck with me, and it was, are you extending a good life or prolonging a bad one? So those words always kind of stuck with and helped to inform where we would draw the line in terms of what we were going to do for Ava.
Yeah, well, that's a very profound statement. Extending a good life or prolonging a bad one. I don't think I'll ever forget that.
Yeah, because Ava couldn't talk. As her diagnosis progressed, it shuts down your motor functions, your nervous system. So she became paralyzed, couldn't eat, couldn't speak. So you really had to become tuned into her communication style that was very subtle to know if she was, happy or hurting or whatever it was.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. What impact has Ava's situation had on your marriage or your extended family for that matter?
The impact that it had for our marriage, I think it brought Kristen and I closer together. It forced us to really be a team. Not that we weren't already, but it just reinforced those ideas. Thankfully, her and I are on the same page when it comes to how much intervention we were going to do, which made things a lot easier. I think it strengthened our relationship. It's just something that we'll always share together.
And your extended family?
I think my dad had a hard time with it because of my sister. So my father only saw Ava twice in her whole life. I kind of wish it was different. I wish that he would have wanted to see Ava more, but that just wasn't the case. And I think it has something to do with my sister. Like he had a hard time with that, and I don't think he wanted to go through that again, which, I can understand that, but at the same time, from my perspective, it would have been nice to have his support more. As fathers, we are the anchor of the family, but especially being in Alaska, especially caring for a child with special needs, it is isolating for everybody being in Alaska, for everybody being in a special needs community, and then even for being the dad who's taken the weight of the situation and put it on his shoulders. My personal feelings are, if I'm trying to be the anchor of this family, who do I lean on when I need to? And I wish it would have been my father more, but that it just wasn't the situation.
Yeah, well, thank you for being open and authentic. So a message to the grandfathers listening out there. We still have a role, right? As a young grandfather myself, right? We have a 4 and a 1-year-old grandson and granddaughter. And I think the message that you're sharing, really resonates with me, which is, if you see one of your kids or one of their spouses struggling, err on the side of engaging. Don't be distant. If they don't want the help, they'll tell you, they'll push you away. And, I think we can all learn from the experience that you were just sharing. So thanks again.
We'll be back with more of the conversation on the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast in just a few moments. But first, this quick message. Please help 21st century dads gather research on families raising children with special needs by having them complete the Special Fathers Network Early Intervention Parents Survey. A link to the survey can be found in the show notes. As a token of our appreciation, each person, mom or dad, who completes the survey will receive a Great Dad coin. Thank you. Now, back to the conversation.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your experience beyond your personal experience. You've done some film work, and then you've created a not-for-profit, and there's some overlap there. And one of the films that you created is entitled Granted, and I'm wondering, what's the backstory on that, and what was that project all about?
Yeah, so the backstory of that was Ava qualified for Make-A-Wish, and originally we were going to take her to Maui because Ava has history there, and because she's blind, getting her other senses excited, her sensations, her feelings, wind in the hair, sun on the face, those types of things were appealing to us and I think to her. But that was during COVID, so we couldn't fly. So just in passing, it just happened to be that one of the Make-A-Wish grantees was talking with Kristen, and she said, well, what else do you guys plan on doing this summer? And she said, well, we plan on getting like a camper and doing some camping. And the Make-A-Wish folks took that and ran with it and said, well, what if we can get you a camper as part of her wish? And we were like, well, sure, that would be great. And Make-A-Wish and Great Alaskan Holidays partnered up to deliver an amazing trailer that had everything that we needed to take Ava out. And as her life was kind of shortening, I knew that as much footage as I can get of her, it's not going to hurt. So I just started filming our adventures. We went on 12 adventures that summer, and then more the next summer using the trailer. And over the summer of 2020, I just basically captured all of our adventures and then later put together the film. So it documents Ava's Make-A-Wish journey, but then it also captures footage of her and her sister Reagan, so that when Reagan gets older, she gets to have something to look back on and remember just an epic summer with her sister.
It's meant a lot to Kristen, having the ability to get out and go camping and spending time with the family. I think it's been very special for her. Sitting around the campfire and just warming up and having s'mores and hot dogs is just, it's my favorite, just being together as a family.
Wow. Well, it is interesting how the Make-A-Wish Foundation works. What an amazing longer-term experience that was. And was it just you filming, or did you actually have like a film crew when you were doing the recordings that you made reference to?
No, it was just me, which looking back, I don't know how it got filmed because, you're taking care of one newborn, Ava, and then hooking up the trailer, dragging it all over creation, and then getting there, setting up, pulling out the camera, filming everything. Like, there was pictures of me during that time period, and I look weathered, and you can tell, or you can understand why. It was just a lot going on, but I'm glad that I did. It was hard during that time, but I'm just glad that we were able to make it happen, because when Reagan gets older, here in another 3 or 4 years or so, when she gets 7 years old or so, we'll show the film to her for the first time, and I'm interested to see how she'll react to it and just being able to see her sister.
Yeah, well, that's very amazing. So how many miles did you put on the trailer, and where were some of the places that you visited?
Oh, we probably put a couple thousand miles, I want to say, because everything in Alaska's big. So, it's 2-hour minimum to get anywhere. Ava's favorite spot was Seward, which is 2.5 hours south of us. She loves it because right there on the water, you get the salty smell from the ocean. It's usually breezy, so breeze in her hair, sun, campfires. It just had a lot of things that I think excited her senses. And you could tell she was excited because she would either start drooling uncontrollably, she would start cooing, or she would just get really excited and then pass out. So she would just go to sleep. So it's you knew she was excited when she was sleeping, because, she was just so kind of ramped up that she just had to come back down and take a nap.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. It's very, very powerful. And as somebody who has watched the documentary, which was made into a 1-hour-long PBS documentary that aired in March of 2023, I was quite moved by it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for pushing yourself to the limits, right? Like you were describing, doing all the things you're doing as a young dad, as a husband with these two young girls, the trailer and all the things that go on behind the scenes, let alone trying to capture the moment, if you will, beyond what most people might be taking a couple photos, maybe a couple videos on their iPhone.
So there's one funny story about that. So during the filming of this, like I said, I had to do everything to, driving the trailer, parking it, setting everything up, getting the kids right, getting Ava, and then filming this whole thing. And there's a shot in the film that's on the ground of me filming Kristen's dad cooking bacon outside on the trailer. And then the next cut is a drone shot overhead of him cooking the bacon. And bacon doesn't take that long to cook, right? So the fact that, we got a handheld shot on the ground with a camera, took that shot, took it down, grabbed the drone, popped it in the air, flew it overhead, set up the shot and everything, it still kind of impresses me, if I can say that, just because, bacon doesn't take but a couple minutes to cook. And just me getting those two shots back to back makes me tired, but also excited that, I gave it 100%.
Yeah, well, I do want to say, because I did have a chance to watch the documentary, you have a gift, and it's a very refined gift, your storytelling ability. And one of the things I was taken by was the scenic nature, right, of the backdrop for this movie, right, being all over Alaska, like you described. And, what a powerful visual impact that is. And then, like you had said, it wasn't all from handheld, but you have a lot of drone photography, which I obviously have a gift for. And just the scenery and the wildlife, it was really a treat. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
So you've pushed yourself, which is just beyond my imagination, to not just create this documentary for Ava's memory, for Reagan's benefit, your family's benefit on a longer term basis, but you've created something called Adventure for Ava. And this is the not-for-profit that you made reference to previously. And you've created a series, a growing list of short documentaries. So what's the backstory on the not-for-profit and how has it evolved?
So the idea came from a time where I do my deep thinking, which unfortunately is between 2 and 3 in the morning when I wake up and I can't go back to sleep. And one of the nights a problem that I was trying to solve is, how do I channel this energy with Ava that's difficult and turn it into something that's positive? And I just took inventory of what I had professionally, the cameras, the equipment, the expertise, and personally, the backstory of capturing our best memories with Ava being outside. It just clicked one day, and our best memories with Ava are outside, doing something different in a place that's new and doing it together as a family. And the idea just came to be, why don't we just do that for other families, take them out on a safe adventure, get them to kind of break the mold of their everyday therapies, their everyday grind, do something different, and then capture it and have a time capsule for them to kind of look back and enjoy that day, and just to see kind of where they were at that point in time. The very first adventure, I had reached out to our physical therapist and I said, do you know of anybody who might fit that, that might want to do that? And she goes, yeah. So I contacted the family and I said, hey, if you could go on any adventure in a day, what would it be? And she said, we want to take a flight to Lake Clark, Alaska, and go on a boat and watch the bears. And in Alaska, that means a 5-hour drive to Homer, a 1-hour flight from Homer to Lake Clark, jump on a pontoon boat, go out on the lake to see the bears. When I heard the bill for that, I think it was around $6 or $7 grand. and all I thought about was what have I gotten myself into? This is an enormous mistake. But thankfully, the company donated their time and resources, and we were able to get a little bit of seed funding to make it happen. And to date, that's been the most expensive adventure, but we've been able to take, at the end of this year, it will be 15 families that we've been able to take out on adventures.
I hope that they realize how beautiful they are and how their kid and their family impacts others.
And for the world to see that these kids can do big things when given the opportunity.
I don't think I ever seen him have this much fun in a long time.
Just even being out of the house and seeing something different.
That's something that we couldn't have done anywhere else in any other way.
That was really neat to just have a day to play.
It was a great experience not only for Cade, but for a bonding experience for him and his brother.
I was really glad that we all got to see as a family.
We don't have a family picture. That's always been our family in pieces.
When she's older, that'll be nice for her to have the memories.
It was just such a special time, such a special day for him.
Seeing my son, and he's going fast, and feeling like a superstar. Thank you that we could have this moment.
I'm wondering, how do people apply for, submit an application to become one of these families?
So on the website, avastory.org, there's a tab where you can either sign up your family or you can nominate another family. So in that intake form, it has who you'd like to nominate or the particulars on your own family. It gives us a little bit of insight into who you are as a family and then what you might possibly want to do for your adventure. And then from there, there's a quick screening process from our family coordinator, and then we'll reach out and figure out what's a good adventure for your family.
And how many of these do you budget to do each year?
So currently we budget for 4, but if there are certain instances that come up, if it's a time-sensitive case or something, then we're happy to extend to 5 or even more.
Okay. Well, I'm super excited because this is all being done in Ava's memory. You know, her life continues to have an impact well beyond her short period of time on Earth. And I think that's very profound. So I'm thinking about advice, and I'm wondering, what advice would you share with a parent, or specifically a parent, including dads, raising a child with special needs?
I think it's just reaching out to the other parents, and you don't need to have any set list of questions ready to go. It doesn't have to be anything formal. Starting a dialogue, especially as a father, it's super important, just because I think we tend to carry a lot more weight, and we don't need to. But if you are going to carry that weight, it's best to kind of split the load, so to speak. And I think that's accomplished just by just having a talk with another dad who's either walked that path himself or not. You know, sometimes just getting somebody who's out of the circle that can at least just lend an ear. Sometimes the most therapeutic things I've done for me personally has just been to talk and just to get it out. And even to Josh, one of my friends who isn't a special needs dad, but just somebody that can be there and listen, and, you know.
Well, what I heard you say, just paraphrasing, is err on the side of engaging, err on the side of communicating.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be much thought put into it. Just open a dialogue and just start talking. It's very therapeutic, and I think my biggest regret going through the situation with Ava is that I didn't reach out and start a dialogue more with some of the dads.
Speaking of which, why have you agreed to be a mentor father as part of the Special Fathers Network?
Well, I think that's important for me because one of the biggest things that helped me through my time raising our child with a special need is just seeing the other families that had made it to the other side. Just showing up and showing people that if I can survive it, you can survive it. And there was a lot of things that helped us along the way that were given to us by other families. And I think it's only right to pass it on to the next generation.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for being involved. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I think just thank you to the other men who have been part of the podcast. Since I've met you, I've went back and looked at some of the other podcasts, and I think just the honesty and the vulnerability, I think that there's a shift going on right now where I think it's becoming more, not acceptable, but I think men feel more comfortable about their mental health and about their emotions. And I think that's a great thing. And I think we need to continue to exercise that, and we need to continue to support each other and to be vulnerable, because that vulnerability, I think it helps not only the person that's going through it, but also people on the other end.
Yeah, well, what I'd like to add is that I think previously, and I'm a generation ahead of you, Dan, vulnerability was perceived to be a weakness, right? You don't want to show a weakness, right? That's just part of how men have been raised traditionally. And that's just not in our society, but I think universally. And I think if you can get beyond that and understand that vulnerability is actually a strength, right? The willingness to ask for help and reach out to others is actually a strength. It's not a weakness, right? Then it's mission accomplished, right? Because hopefully that's the way we're going to raise our children, our sons as well as daughters, right? To not try to figure it out all on their own.
Yeah, you can suffer silently and pass whatever toxicity is brewing up inside of you onto your kids, onto your relationship, onto your job, or you can kind of man up and say, hey, I need a little bit of help. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because that's not only going to affect you for the better, but it's going to affect all the people around you for the better.
Absolutely.
That's why you got to put your own oxygen mask on first, right?
Yep, it's pretty basic, but so true. So if somebody wants to learn about your work, your films, or to contact you, what's the best way to do that?
So professionally, my website, danredfield.com. In terms of the special needs families, it's avasstory.org. So even some of our out-of-state families who would like to find their way up to Alaska and go on an adventure, they're more than welcome to sign up. And we're always very honored and privileged to be able to come into their inner circles and tell their story and take them out on a fun adventure.
Well, thank you. We'll be sure to include that in the show notes so it'll make it as easy as possible for somebody to get a hold of you. Dan, thank you for your time and many insights. As a reminder, Dan is just one of the dads who's part of the Special Fathers Network, a mentoring program for fathers raising a child with special needs. If you'd like to be a mentor father or are seeking advice from a mentor father with a similar situation to your own, please go to 21stcenturydads.org. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As you probably know, the 21st Century Dads Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which means we need your help to keep our content free to all concerned. Would you please consider making a tax-deductible contribution? I would really appreciate your support. Dan, thanks again.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for listening to the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children match up with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support other dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we would be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Lastly, we're always looking to share interesting stories. If you'd like to share your story or know of a compelling story, please send an email to david@21stcenturydads.org.
The Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast was produced by me, Tom Couch. Thanks again to Horizon Therapeutics, who believe that science and compassion must work together to transform lives. That's why they work tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics at horizontherapeutics.com.